Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. This is episode 3. This is Andrea.
Hi, I'm Andrea. And this is Andrew.
Very good. We've rehearsed this, as you can tell. We've got a very exciting show today. We're doing a very Australian show. Our guest on Knitters of the World is Vicki, who's coming to us today from southeastern Australia, a small town, inland town called Brogo. And our interview guest today is Petah of Dingo Dyeworks. I think some people will have seen Petah on her own channel. We'll be speaking to her in a little bit more depth. Petah comes from, or is based in, Perth in Western Australia. So we've got a span of about 4,000 kilometres between those two guests alone. We are also presenting today the interim submissions, the interim reports from our knit-along participants, or from some of our knit-along participants. So people who are taking part in the Fair Isle knit-along and also the Fruity First Garment knit-along are showing us some of their works. And that's covering all sorts of different places. And It's really fun. So I think that's worth staying around for.
Yeah, so thank you for putting in your videos. So let's start off now with under construction, and you're first.
I'm first on under construction.
Yes.
All right. What I'm constructing is my hiking jacket. Okay, so here it is. It's coming along. I've talked about tension. My tension is getting better. I don't think my tension was ever that bad. I did get some suggestions and I will look into those. I've done some research into this and I will look into it in more detail.
Research.
Yes, research.
Okay.
Yeah, research.
Okay.
Reading stuff and finding out, and getting advice. My tension's pretty good. It's got better. Anyway, I'll look at that. I'll talk about it a bit more in another episode, not now. So it's coming along. My speed is a little bit better, but Andrea still says I need some coaching and I need to take some teaching.
On the pearl rose.
I'm summoning up my strength and my patience and intellectual capacities to do that. Yeah, pearl rose. The knitting rows are really good.
But slow and steady wins the race.
Slow and steady there. That's what you like to say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You'll
Keep
get there.
telling me I'm slow.
Steady.
Yep. Yorkshire Wildlife Trust wool. I like putting in a plug for the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. You can find out about that on our blog. It's coming along.
In episode, was it 10? I think episode 10.
Yeah, I think it's episode 10. We speak to the people who are responsible for bringing us Yorkshire Wildlife Trust wool. It's coming along soon. It's going to be set in sleeves. Andrea's the head designer on this garment, although we do have different influences. So set in sleeves. So I think that means the garment's going to go up like that, and then I'm going to go like that, and then like that.
Sort of in a curve, yes.
All right, a bit of a... All right.
Yes.
So that's coming up. That's something I've got to look forward to. That'll make my rows a little bit shorter.
Yes, that'll be very exciting for you.
Yeah, that'll be a little mental help there.
It only gets better.
Yep. So that's my jacket.
So that's you done?
Yep.
Good.
I'm done.
Okay. So I'm knitting on my blossom at the moment, but I'm not going to speak much about that because it really hasn't had much attention. Oh. But it's just easy knitting in the round while I'm listening to you. So I am going to talk about my Firebirds, which have been coming on very nicely. Somebody
did point out on Instagram.
Yes.
They're my Firebirds.
Yes, your Firebirds.
Just as a correction.
So I'm knitting this jumper for Andrew, and it's adapted from Jade Starmore's cardigan design called Firebirds. She originally wrote it for a little girl's cardigan, and then adapted it into a woman's cardigan, and I'm adapting it into a gentleman's jumper for Andrew. Yeah. So it's been coming on very well. In the previous episode, I had done 16 Firebirds. I have now done 80 Firebirds.
80 Firebirds?
80 Firebirds.
How many Firebirds are you going to do for me, dolls?
I think probably around 140 if I have made correct calculations. So I've just started the armhole steeks, and I've got a little bit to talk to you about this because it's interesting. First of all, I want to say the wool is Alice Starmore's yarn, which is the Hebridean 2-ply, and I bought it in a kit from the Virtual Yarns. And I have to say it is my favourite wool, and I feel every time I knit one of her designs or her daughter's, as in this case, Jade, I feel like I've come home. It's just this wonderful, I do.
Yeah.
It's this wonderful feeling of the wool. I just love the feeling of the wool. It's very elastic. It's beautiful colours anyway. I love the rhythm of having the wool going through both hands and the rhythm of the two-handed Fair Isle. It's just me. It's what I love doing most, I think. And it's interesting. I love to do all different kinds of projects, but when I come back to this, I think, this is good.
Just as a public service announcement, there's, for the virtual yarns, there's free shipping from some point, isn't there?
Yes,
anywhere
after
in the world.
£25, I think, an order above £25, you get free shipping. Yeah.
Which I guess is something like $40 or $50.
But this is one of the prizes that we're going to donate for
the Fair Isle
KAL is you'll be able to pick, so the winner of that will be able to pick £25 worth of wool and have it shipped to them. But getting back to this, you've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, that's
again.
called a derailing question.
Derailing question. Okay. Okay. So I have done a little bit of careless planning on this. So I thought I would share that with you so that you don't make the same kind of mistakes that I do. But let me just say, first of all, the careless planning that I've done is not disastrous and you probably won't really notice it. But I'm going to talk about it anyway because it's interesting to learn from. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was, I've done some little designs here. So this is basically what a Firebird, this is an illustration of the Firebird, okay? So there's two designs, one with the Firebird looking over its body to the left, and one with the Firebird looking over its body to the right. So I could have made, because this design was originally a cardigan construction, you have to see that they've set up the birds differently, and you've got to allow for the button bands down the front when you're considering how many stitches you're going to have and where you're going to place the birds. What I decided to do is to have 16 birds. So I would have 8 birds on the front, 8 birds on the back, and I would have the centre point to be here so that the chests are meeting, and 4 birds would be looking over their left side on the left front side, and 4 birds would be looking over their right side on the right front side. And then when you get around to the back, it would end up that they're looking over their backs and their tails are meeting. So I would have 4 looking over their backs in this direction and 4 looking over their backs in that direction. So my plan actually was that this would be the front and this would be the back. So the last time I did a in the round Fair Isle jumper was the Lovage, and that was by Marie Wallen. And what she does is she starts her row at the centre back. So when you're knitting in the round, you're knitting around like this in a spiral. So when you've finished your first row and you're coming to your second, it's going to look like this, and that's when you get this jogging. This jogging happens.
Yeah, which you're only going to see if you've got a change of colour.
If you've got a if you've got a change of colour in a line, and it shows up particularly in stripes, you can see that. When you've got a more complicated Fair Isle pattern with more muted tones, you don't see it so much. So she puts her start of the row centre back. And I just automatically did that on my jumper. Alice Starmore, on all of her jumpers, when I think back to it now, she does the start of her row under the arm. So any jogging that you'll see is going to be under the arm, which you won't see at all because you very rarely stare under someone's arm.
Yeah.
But the chest is obviously going to come in view and the eye falls there, and it also falls on the back. So that would have been the smart thing to do. But I just started, and not only did I start my row in the middle, I started in the middle of the front. So I started my row, and you will see my jogging right here in between there, which is going to be right here on your chest, which is a really stupid place to have it.
Yeah, that wasn't very smart, dolls.
So what it means is that this sort of little loop construction here looks very wonky. Yes, it's sort of lopsided, hanging off to one side. You don't notice it in the birds, but you notice it particularly there. That's not such a great look for a beautiful jumper. So I'm a bit disappointed with myself. I didn't actually even think about it till I'd done probably about 32 birds, and I thought, stuff this, I'm not going to unpick for that. So I am going to show you close-ups of my knitting, this part, and my knitting on this part. I'll probably put it over Andrew. And I would like your opinion. My instinct says this has to be the front. The chests together have to be the front. And the tails together have to be on the tail at the back.
Yeah, although on this one here, they are actually looking at each other.
They are looking at each other. So it's really, as I said to start off with, my preface was this really isn't a big deal. So my mistakes aren't disastrous. But you can let me know, do you think I should go with this as the front on the chest, or is this droopy loopy bit
Droopy loopy
between the birds not so disastrous, and I should keep this one as the front? So that was my first careless mistake.
dolls, I reckon just don't tell anyone and they'll never notice.
Well, I will notice.
And listen,
And any other knitter will be and I tell you, when you walk around in Wales and the UK,
they'll all be going, oh, look at that droopy whoopy jumper.
There's lots of knitters there, and they will see it and they will go, that's hand knitted, and they'll come and investigate you. And then they'll see it. Anyway, so that's the first careless mistake I did. The second careless mistake I did, no, I'm going to tell you a little bit of a success story first, or something neutral.
Yeah, good.
So I'm up to the sleeves. I had deliberated for quite a long time. Are the sleeves going to be set in sleeves, or are they going to be drop shoulder sleeves? Now, this might be a little bit difficult to explain and make sense of, but I figured if it was for me, I would definitely do set in sleeves. If it's for Andrew, he can get away with drop shoulder sleeves, so I'm going to do that for him. The problem is, what you're going to do, normally when you're doing a fitted jumper, you do shoulders that are slanted down like that, so that you would first of all decrease here and then decrease sort of in steps so that you get a slant. But when you've got a Fair Isle like this, the front and the back is going to be straight shoulders, and you're going to graft the stitches from the front piece and the back piece together. So they're going to be straight shouldered. So the way to get around that is to make, so that it doesn't look a bit sort of like an army jacket, is to make it a little bit shorter here and narrow in the sleeve cap a little bit, and then that sort of fits around the top nicely. Now that would go really well with my body type. I wasn't sure about Andrew because he's wider here, and I just thought, I'm not sure.
Sorry, are you saying I've got broad shoulders?
Yes, darling.
All right.
I'm not sure about that, so I'm going to stick with the drop shoulder, and it's not going to be too droppy. It's going to just sort of sit about there. So that's what I've decided to do. So what you do for a drop shoulder, and I'm also going to put a picture here so that you can see up close what I've done with the steek, is on the opposite end, so on the sides, you put a stitch, just one stitch on a safety pin like this. So I've got that there and this one here. Then you cast on 10 more stitches over the top in that space. The outside stitches, so stitch number 1 and stitch number 10, you will always knit in the dark background colour. Whatever that background colour is, you'll keep it in the dark colour. And they're called the edge stitches. Those stitches are the row of stitches that you will later sew the sleeve into. The middle stitches are the steeking stitches, so there are 8 stitches there, and you knit them alternatively in a checkerboard effect with your foreground or motif colour and the background colour. and you will cut them up the center eventually and also cut them down so it's only about 2 stitches wide in the end, and they will be sewn back like a little hem later. So that's what that looks like. It sounds complex, but it's actually pretty easy. Alice Starmore in her book, Fair Isle Knitting, explains it in the most simple way. So that's a great book to learn about sticking from. But you can see from my picture what I've done. So now I just have to, I'm going to do his from the armhole up to the shoulder, roughly around 24 centimeters. So it's very easy for me now. I've got that 10 stitch steek in on either side, and I just keep knitting up like a tube for another 24 centimeters. And then I will graft, well, before that I will start on the neck shaping, front neck shaping and back neck shaping. So that's that bit. And now it gets me on to my second little boo-boo. As you can see here, this is a diagram of a neck and shoulders. So what you need to do, now I didn't think this through when I was calculating, but I had to figure out how wide is Andrew, how wide do I want the garment to be, how many firebirds am I going to place in, and I'm going to have a center stitch, which is an added stitch in the middle, and an added stitch in the back, just so that the birds can meet each other nicely.
Not crash into each other.
Not crash or peck each other. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so that's what I had to do. And it worked out really well for me to have 8 birds on the front and 8 birds on the back. But what that did is, then you take out your stitch from either side of the armholes, and you should have an odd number of stitches at the front and an odd number of stitches in the back. That's what you need. I don't have that. I've got even and even. The reason why you need it is because when you're doing your neck shaping, right in the middle, so I would put, say, I've got 21 stitches here, but it could be any number, but you have the center, an odd number of stitches I will leave on a holder, and then I will put a steek across here, and then I will decrease regularly and evenly on both sides, so that this is a mirror of that. For that to happen, I need 1 middle stitch and then the same amount of stitches on either side of that middle stitch. So that and that plus that equals an odd number of stitches. Okay, which I don't have. So what I have done is, on one side of my garment, I have 151 stitches, and on the other side of my garment, I have 153 stitches, which is not going to be a big difference because my tension is 28 stitches for 10 centimeters. So it's really just 2/3 of a centimeter, and that I can fudge. So it's not a big deal, but it's just not optimal. I'm telling you about this because it's just interesting things if you're doing a garment, just to remember. So either, Andrew, you will be slightly like this or like that to make your garment stay flat. No, you won't really. But what I will do is, when it comes to, because I need to have the same amount of stitches on the front shoulder, right shoulder, and as the back right shoulder, so I can graft them together. So when I've got a stitch too much here, I will just knit 2 together and then graft it. So I'll fudge it, you won't know the difference. But that's an interesting thing to think about when you're planning.
Odd numbers.
Odd numbers, yeah.
Yes.
But I would be interested in hearing your opinion, so you can leave a comment below as to whether the front should be this and slightly wonky, or this and looking pretty perfect.
Or whether you should rip back and just...
Right.
Or...
Yes.
You put it under the sleeve.
I can't. I've already put my sleeves in. And then I thought it's pretty boring to have them all in one direction on this side.
Would they all be looking that way on the front and then looking that way on the back?
Yeah. I thought that's just a bit boring.
Everyone would see me and go...
Yes.
What's over there? Must be a cat.
Hi, Opposites on Ravelry, and this is my sweater for the Fair Isle knit along so far.
Hello, I'm Linda, You-La-La on Ravelry. My sweater is the thistle pattern, and I'm using yarn from Denmark called KAL, which is 100% wool with very long colorway runs. I have about an inch left to go on the body of my sweater, and then I can start the sleeves. Sure hope I can finish in time. Thanks.
Hello Fruity Knitting Podcast, Tilly Trout here. I'm going to make a yoked Fair Isle jumper. Here are all my colours. I've got the blues of the sea, I've got the yellow of a beach hut, I've got the sand, I've got the fluffy white clouds, there's going to be sailing boats going by, all in a jumper.
I'm Catherine, Meyerwin on Ravelry. My project is Isolde Teague's Brunsfield vest out of Jamieson 2-ply jumper weight and some Warelma Dithala from my stash.
Hello, my name's Elaine and I'm joining the KAL from south of England, from a place called Bromley in Kent, and the design I've chosen is from Drops. It's a Fair Isle jacket and it's the number 6720, and the colours I've chosen are these beautiful autumn shades, and here they all are.
Hi everyone, I'm Florence Clark from Palmerston North, New Zealand. I've chosen to knit the Lovage jersey for this knit along. So this is how far I've got on the body, in colours that are obviously different to the pattern. I have chosen to over dye yarn that I already had to create the palette that I wanted. Happy knitting, bye!
Hello Andrew and Andrea from Oklahoma, I'm Lynn. I plan to do a short-sleeved sweater with a Fair Isle yoke. Here's some ideas. Using the Marius chart, or part of it, and I'll use the numbers from Ann Bed's top-down sweater. I'm going to use Alice Darmore's yarn for the first time. You inspired me. My main color will be Kitty Wake. My contrasting colors will be Summertide and Selkie. I'd also like to do a vest that's Fair Isle all over, and I think I'll use the Brown Sheep Company from Nebraska, their nature spun wool, as it comes with a lot of choices. Love the podcast, love the projects.
Hi, I'm Margaret. I live in the Hudson Valley of New York. I knitted Cruden by Isolde Teague, which is finished. I knitted it using the Spring Summer palette from Jamieson and Smith on their Shetland wool.
Hello, my name is Sabine. You can find me on Ravelry as Fritzi01. I am from Germany. This is the yarn I've chosen for my cardigan. The pattern is called Viola Kofte. I have enough colors and I have to choose what I'll use. Until today, I've only knitted a swatch. I've never done a steep before. Bye bye and happy knitting.
Hi, my name is Sarah S. Maffett on Ravelry. I'm making the Branches and Buds pullover sweater by Carrie Bostic Hodge from Making Magazine #1. I'm using Norwegian wool, Skol, S-K-O-L, as well as shepherd's wool from Stonehenge Fiber Mill. Have a great day.
Hi, I'm Terry, Holity on Ravelry. I have just finished the first sleeve for my Colorwork KAL, Fair Isle KAL. Got to do a little color work on the cuff. Here are my colors, and I'm raring to go on to the next part.
Hi, my name is Tina and I'm coming to you from Sydney in Australia, and I'll be making the Loch Lomond cardigan by Jade Starmore, and here's a little picture. I'm still waiting for my wool to arrive in the post. I can't wait to receive it. And thank you so much, Andrea and Andrew, for hosting this fantastic knit along. See you soon.
Kjør da.
Bare fortsett å filme, så kan du komme litt nærmere.
Ja. Ja, det er fint.
Ja.
Sånn.
Har det gått 20 sekunder?
Nå har det det.
hope you really enjoy that. It was so much fun putting it together, and it was great to see the faces and hear the voices of the people who have been chatting along in the Fair Isle KAL. And I think it's probably been really good for other people or other members of the KAL to see the faces and hear the voices of the people who they've sort of got to know by chatting on the threads.
Yep. And there's some spectacular work in there. We should have a little bit of a look at the individual works, but I noticed the thistle looked like a really stunning design there. So, yeah, really, really cool to see that coming along.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be showing the Fruity First Garment KAL selfie collage very soon. But first of all, we've got...
Yeah, so we're going to jump on to our Knitters of the World segment. And as we mentioned earlier, our guest today on Knitters of the World is Vicki from Brogo in southeastern Australia. So enjoy this.
Hi, my name's Vicki Younger. I live in southeastern Australia in a small place called Brogo, which is home to about 350 people. I live here with my partner in a mud brick solar-powered house, and we live on about 5.5 acres. And from here we also run a small Castile soap-making business. We lead what we believe to be a fairly sustainable lifestyle. We grow lots of fruit and nut trees under a covered orchard. We grow vegetables. We have sheep, we have chooks, and we also have a couple of dogs to keep us company. My journey with knitting started when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and one Christmas I received a gift of a little basket done up with some small balls of coloured yarn and some short plastic needles. So from there I learnt to do garter stitch and made a garter stitch scarf, which I found completely boring and didn't give it another thought for a few more years. And I really have no idea what piqued my interest later, but when I was about 12, I asked my mother if I could knit a sweater, and she said that she would buy the wool for me provided I promised I would finish it. So she helped me do the rib, she helped me with the raglan shaping, and apart from that I knitted the rest of the sweater myself. It was in a red, yellow and orange variegated yarn, and it was something to behold, but at least it was 100% wool that time. So once I'd done that, I kind of kept knitting really all through my life. But the thing that's opened it up for me over the past 10 years has been Ravelry, and largely because I've been able to learn to knit from charts. And so prior to Ravelry, I had not even any idea about knitting lace. I didn't even know you could knit from charts. But once I started being able to, I made a shawl. That was my first effort, and I made an Aeolian shawl. And once I nailed how to read charts, I haven't looked back. I've found it just opened up the world for me as far as knitting goes. And now if I'm looking for patterns and I have a choice between a pattern with written instructions and a pattern that's charted, I'll go for charted every time. I find it so much easier and so much easier to see what's going on with your knitting. I wanted to show you a few of my favourite knitted items, and these are my favourite knitted items that are favourites really because of all different kinds of reasons. The first one is the one I'm wearing, the engineered seam sweater, which I've knitted in a cache Geelong, which is a lovely heathered green colour that's shot with orange and red flecks. And I'm sure you can't see the colour in the video recording, but in the sunlight, it really sparkles. The thing that I love most about this, I've been wearing it for a couple of months since I finished it, and I'm wearing it at least 3 or 4 times a week. It's soft, it's squishy, it's warm, and with each wash, it gets softer and softer. The next thing is my Aeolian shawl, and I've knitted this in a chocolate brown cash silk merino, and I finished it with some copper coloured beads, and I'm not sure if that's going to show up in the video, but as I said, this was my learning curve to learn how to knit from lace charts, and it just really started me on my journey of being able to knit more complex things, but most of all knitting from reading charts. Following on from that, once I became a bit more adept at reading charts, I decided to knit something from a Japanese pattern. And it was quite daunting at first, but it's not as complicated as you think. Once you understand what the symbols mean in Japanese charting, it's not that difficult, although it's quite complex and a lot of attention to detail. This is my batik pullover, and I just love the stitch pattern in this. The Japanese have the most amazing stitch patterns. The good thing about Japanese patterns is that all the shaping and all the instructions you need are in the charts themselves, so you really don't even need to be able to read Japanese in order to knit them. The next one, yes, it's another orange sweater. I have quite a few of these. This is my Mary Queen of Scots, which comes from the Alice Starmore revised version of her Tudor Roses book. And the knitting isn't really that complex in this piece, but the most, I think, the nicest detail is the finishing around the hems and the cuffs. And I've used some Wollmeise red and a fuchsia colour to finish it off. The most challenging part for me was this lining up the collar, so that I had essentially 3 thicknesses of yarn that I had to pick up the stitches through the 3 thicknesses and line it up perfectly so that it matched, and I found that quite a challenge. The finishing on this was probably more complex than the knitting itself. And lastly, my endearment cardigan, which is in a teal coloured extra fine merino. The stitch pattern's quite beautiful in this. It's simple and it was easy to memorise, but it is quite a nice stitch pattern. The thing that's really nice about this is the finishing. The collar here is double knitted, as is the hem, and it also has a split hem. Not sure if you can see it that well. So they're just really small details, but it kind of gives it a really nice tailored finish. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Vicki, for preparing that for us. I really enjoyed seeing or hearing about the house that they're living in with the solar power and the mud brick house and the general environmental efforts that are going in there. And it was also interesting to hear that they have their own soap making business. We've got a link to the online site for the soap business in our show notes, which you can find on fruityknitting.com. So yeah, thank you very much, Vicki.
Yeah, I've been following Vicki's work for quite a while on Ravelry. I befriended her a couple of years back, actually, when I first saw her work on an Alice Starmore forum.
She has a huge repertoire, a huge portfolio of
She does, of garments.
Garments there.
Yeah, so very good to look at. And I love the colours that she uses because they're all colours that I would wear myself. It's probably because we're both redheads that. So it's been great to watch what colours she uses in some of her combinations on the Alice Starmore garments that she's knitted, that I'm likely to knit as well. So that was good. So we thought we would show you a map of Australia so that you could see exactly where everybody is from and see how huge Australia actually is. So we're going to take Brogo as the centre of the world. Mm-hmm. So Vicki, as you know, is from Brogo, and that is on the southeastern coast.
It's not actually on the coast.
It's not the coast, but it's inland, but it's on the southeastern side of Australia. And it should be very beautiful there. I think she said there was about 300 inhabitants in her small country town.
Yep.
And it's right next to a national park. And if you have watched episode 1, you'll see that I speak a fair bit about Albury. That's where I grew up. And Albury is around 450 kilometres west inland from Brogo. And you have to cross the Kosciuszko National Park, which is very mountainous. So it actually takes you about 6 hours to drive there. And Andrew is from Melbourne. So he grew up in Melbourne. And Melbourne is 600 kilometres south of Brogo. And it takes about 7 hours to drive. And I'm going to just quickly insert in here a picture of Andrew and I when we were 26, fresh and young.
Wow.
So for any Australian Victorian viewers, this picture was taken on the Mornington Peninsula at the back beach in Blairgowrie.
Blairgowrie. That's where my family had holidays when I was a kid. So, we were there often, and Andrea and I visited there.
If we go 4,000 kilometres directly west from Brogo, we will find Petah. And Petah you're going to meet in the interview, which is coming up very soon. And she's a yarn dyer, and she lives in Perth. So that's 4,000 kilometres directly west from Brogo. And in the interview, she talks about how she's just been on a road trip for 1,000 kilometres, and she went north inland from Perth to go and check out the wildflowers, which are in bloom now. So that just gives you a little idea how big and beautiful Australia is.
Yeah. I had a quick look, and I did see, just in terms of land area, Australia is about 3 million square miles, and I saw America is about 3.5 million. All right, so it gives you an idea of how big it is. That enormous part of Australia in the middle is just all desert, so that's why we have a significantly different population.
Yeah.
The majority of Australians live on the east coast. Okay, you take Sydney and Melbourne, and you've got over a third of the population.
Yeah.
In those two cities.
Yeah. So we're up to the Fruity First Garment KAL now.
Hi, Dana. Daylight Knits, Dynamite on Instagram, Ravelry, and Twitter. My garment, Windows to My Soul by Joji Locatelli.
Hello everyone, I'm Godelieve from Belgium. I will show you my progress I made so far. I cast it on yesterday. I'm knitting the Buckham cardigan by Pamela Wynne, and my lovely yarn is from Erica Knight, the vintage collection. Yeah, good luck to everyone.
Hi everybody, I'm Linda. My Ravelry name is This Wheel, and I'm working on the Order of the Garter pattern, and I have gotten this far using my own homespun yarn.
Hello, I am Nana. I am talking to you from the south of Portugal, and I am entering the First Garment KAL, knitting Melanie Berg's Zeitgeist cardigan using Holst Garn yarn in the lilac colorway, which is a 95% wool, 5% cashmere yarn.
Hi, I'm Sharon in Pennsylvania, and I haven't started my cardigan yet, but I hope to cast on this week. And I'm going to be making Montaigne by Karen Borel, and I'm going to be using Patton's Classic Wool in the color Passion Heather.
My name is Catherine Kirby from the United States, the state of Pennsylvania, and for my pattern I chose In Stillness by Alicia Plummer, and it's a top-down construction, and I liked the fancy ribbed section at the back and the top. And for my yarn choice, I chose Juniper Moon Moonshine, which is a super fine alpaca, silk, and wool blend in the colorway Lime. So it's going to be a great adventure, and I'm excited.
This is my little cardigan I'm working on. A split for the sleeves. Oh my god! I haven't dropped any. It's fine. Safety. But it's close. It's a year-round cardigan on Ravelry.
congratulations to all the participants of the Fruity First Garment KAL. And I hope this is going to inspire you to have a wardrobe full of garments for you and your family from now on.
Yep. Thank you very much for everyone who managed to get stuff in, who conquered the technology and their own terror of sitting in front of the camera, although I don't know that anyone was really terrified. We're an intimate group.
Yes.
In my KAL. But I'm really pleased that people are getting in there. I'm certainly excited about getting my garment finished. I'm not sure whether end of October will be the
Yes, you might fail your
end of
own
October.
KAL.
It's still what is it, 6 weeks maybe.
Yeah. Now we're going to fit in from the archives, and if you go back through previous episodes, you may have seen me already wearing this top. And I had planned to tell you about it, but we ran out of time, so I'm going to fit that in today quickly. So the top that I'm wearing is a design by Kim Hargraves, and you can find the pattern in her book Spirit, and it's called Cheeky. And she designed it using a Rowan Panama, which I think is a cotton blend. And I've used a Danish yarn for this design, and it is the Merinos yarn, and it's a mixture of silk and cotton. So it's 60% raw silk and 40% cotton. And there's 3 threads in it. So there's a thicker raw silk thread, and then there's 2 very shiny cotton threads. And the 2 cotton threads are different colours. One's a real salmon and one's a real pink. So it gives it a really nice look, sort of a depth to the colour. I had to rework all of the maths because it was a different gauge. That was a bit annoying, but apart from that, it's a very easy design. It's got the typical feature of Kim Hargraves on the neckline. You just pick up the stitches and you knit a few rows of reverse stocking stitch so that it curls back in on itself like this.
Did you show us another garment which had that same?
Yes, another
Good.
Kim Hargraves.
Okay.
But it shows a really beautiful, it does a really beautiful trimming to a neckline.
Yeah.
And here on the cap sleeves, she's just simply, you just cast off and it's rolling back on itself. So she's just using a typical stocking stitch, which will roll on itself to be the edging here. If I stand up, you might be able to see how it's like a little fringe or a little frill on the bottom. And that's another feature that she uses quite often, is you cast on, I think about 4 times the amount of stitches that you need, and then you decrease in the first 2 rows by half. So you decrease by half and then decrease by half again, and that gives this sort of little frilled edge here. And this loose section, and then this bit's fitted.
And so what's she done here?
That's just another set of decreases at the waist. Okay, but that's not such a rapid decrease as down on the end, so you don't get the...
But it still stands out.
It still stands out, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's a really cute design. I love it. I can highly recommend Kim Hargraves. I think she's a great designer. So that's from the archives today.
Yeah, and it's your summer stuff. We're actually getting, we can't complain too much about Germany since we decide to live here, but we're actually getting summer here in Germany. It's 31 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry, but it's warm, and it's going to be warm for another couple of days, and it's been warm for the last few weeks.
That's great.
It's
I
really
love it
good.
though. You need to have a good sweat before the winter comes in.
Yep.
That's my philosophy. So we're going to finish now. We're going to have, soon you'll be watching the interview with Petah from Dingo Dyeworks. It's a fantastic interview. I had so much fun doing it. It was a tiny bit bittersweet for me because it was lovely to meet Petah, and she's a really likeable, personable person. But she's very passionate about the Australian landscape, and so am I. So the more she talked about it, the more homesick I became. But I hope you enjoy this interview. So we'll say goodbye from us.
Yep. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch us today, and we'll be back in about 2 weeks. You can catch us, program notes are on fruityknitting.com, and you can connect to us anywhere via that.
Yeah, Instagram and all the rest of it. And if you like the video, please subscribe.
Yep.
So we'll say goodbye now. Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the Fruity Knitting Podcast. I have a very special Australian guest with me today, and it's Petah from Dingo Dyeworks. You may have seen her on her podcast or already used her beautiful hand-dyed yarns. When I first saw Petah, it was through her podcast, and I felt an immediate connection to her because she has such a love for Australian bush and landscape, and I do as well. It's the one thing that haunts me living here in Germany as an Australian expat. So Petah talks about the Australian flora and fauna with a lot of passion because it's the inspiration for her colourways. And when I saw her yarn, it really made me homesick. She's got the colours just right. Petah migrated from the Netherlands to Australia as a child, and I think her background to becoming a yarn dyer is an interesting story. So thank you very much, Petah, for being on the podcast with us today.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start with your personal background as it relates to you becoming a knitter and a yarn dyer. Can you tell us about it?
Well, as you already said, I was born in the Netherlands, and I was born in a farming family. All my family are on the land. And I was also born in a very creative family. All the ladies in my family do a lot of knitting and embroidery of all sorts and lots of crafts. But the men are also very creative outside and on the land where they often need to be practical and creative. So I've always seen a lot of creativity around me. And then in primary school in about year 3 or 4, I was taught to knit. As you said, we migrated to Australia, my family, when I was 13, and you know the Australian countryside and the climate made an enormous impact on me back then. There was such strong differences between the Netherlands and Australia. And then we explored our country as a family. It was our new country, and there was lots to be seen and experienced. And so family holidays were often as driving holidays to the outback. We went panning for gold, looking for sapphires, fossicking for opals, and things like that. And even so much so that, there was such a love for our new country that my family later on began an opal business online. So I really enjoyed all of that, and I enjoyed the colours, particularly in the gemstones, in the earth, in the skies. You know, everything in Australia is just very vivid and it made a huge impact on me, I think. And then later on, my daughter, when she was about 8 or 9, she was taught to knit at school. And I think it was then that she brought her knitting home, and it rekindled that love for knitting, even more so than when I was young, actually. And I'm still knitting, and she's put her knitting aside already. But yeah, I've just kept knitting. And then a few years after that, I was lucky enough to be in France, and I met the lovely Jenny from Fibre Spates from the UK, and she taught us how to dye yarn. She just taught us the basics, and I immediately just loved the process of dyeing yarn. And so I felt, I kind of kept going back to that occasionally when I really needed to zone out and get into flow. I would dye yarn. And so, yeah, I really, I think I fell in love with it then.
And your yarns are all protein fibres, aren't they? And I think you've taken a lot of care in choosing and sourcing your yarn bases. So can you tell us about what criteria have been important to you in doing this?
Well, it sort of almost coincidentally all became Australian. I didn't really intend for that to happen initially, but I was already, as I said, I already really love Australian nature and the colour that Australia has in it. In its environment. And then when I was trying different yarn bases, I bought bits and pieces from all over the world. But it actually was the Australian Merino that I just kept going back to. I loved it so much. It was just so soft, so fine. And then the whole story behind where it came from and everything really just impressed me so much. So, for example, the new Merino base, which is my fair dinkum yarn, it comes from sustainable properties, from non-mulesed sheep. That just made a huge impression on me also. So I then thought, well, why not? If it's such high quality yarn anyway, and it's Australian, then why not make it a whole Australiana theme? And so that's what happened there.
And what I find also is interesting, and people probably don't know this about you, but you studied veterinary science at uni, didn't you? So you've had some connection already with animals and farming, and would know a little bit more in detail about mulesing. And is there anything that you want to share with us on that aspect as a vet?
Yeah, that's right. I did study veterinary science and graduated in 92 from the University of Queensland. And during your course, you taught a lot about the production industries. The sheep and wool industry, for example, is one. And coming from a farming background, I was already very comfortable in a farming environment anyway. And I still really enjoy connecting with the farmers, the people, the primary producers of our country. So whilst I was at university, we had to do prac work on a sheep property, and so we drove out to a sheep property about 1,000 kilometres west of Brisbane, and we went there to mulese the lambs. And this is where they surgically remove some skin from around the breech area of the lambs so that they don't get struck down by fly strike. The blowfly will lay its larvae on the skin and in the wet, moist areas, and the sheep then go down and they die. So we were a little bit anxious about this procedure and not feeling totally comfortable about having to do it. But as we were approaching the property, we saw sheep on the side of the road, and it had actually missed out on getting mulesed. So when they were rounding up the flock, this lamb had missed out. And so it had got fly strike. So the sheep was down, the crows were there pecking its eyes out, it was unable to see, it was unable to get up, it was unable to eat, and we actually finished its life. And we were shaking in our boots, the three of us students there having to do such a thing, but we wanted to put that poor sheep out of its misery. And that is actually when we all realised, without even saying anything in the car, I tell you, it was the quietest car trip after that. We all felt sick, but we all realised what an important procedure the mulesing actually was. But what I like about the new Merino wool that I'm using as my yarn base is that it comes from sustainable properties and non-mulesed sheep. And that is actually where this new generation of farmers, they're breeding sheep with a more plain body. And so they don't have the folds in their skin so much, and therefore there is no longer a need to muse those sheep. So although musing is a necessary evil in some areas, it is ideal to not have to muse. And I like that. And then to be able to source yarn that is so fine and so soft, such high quality, and also come from non-muled sheep, well, that ticked all my boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's such an interesting experience for you as a vet, being able to, you know, have such hands-on experience with it and dealing with farmers and understanding the background of it, because it's very easy when you live in a city just to be quite condemning of certain farming practices without fully understanding where they've come from or why they've had to happen. But it's great that these new farmers or the new generation farmers are they changing it genetically? Is that what they're trying to do? For the Merino?
Breeding. That's correct, Andrea. They're breeding more plain-bodied sheep with all the ewes on the land, and then the lambs are generally then born with less folding in their skins, and so therefore there is less moisture on the sheep in the paddock, and therefore the fly is less likely to lay its eggs there. And that's how they prevent fly strike. So it's a wonderful concept. It's also good to check your flocks regularly, and you can only do that on smaller properties and smaller flocks. You know, these really big properties with lots of sheep on them, they are more difficult to farm them more intensively. You know, they are in the paddocks for longer periods of time and not getting checked so regularly. But yeah, I think that's the future for Australian sheep, is to breed more plain-bodied sheep. I think the sheep farmers of today are very aware of their environment and long-term productivity from their land. And for that reason, they're very concerned about keeping a balanced ecosystem, which means, you know, avoiding erosion, avoiding overgrazing, and looking after the land. They have to look after the land, you know, the grasses that are on it, keep
the soil
look after their soils, and also look after the biodiversity. You know, keep all the flora and fauna there, as well as be able to produce from that land. And people are becoming very aware of that. And I remember even 20 years ago when I was going on prac work, those farmers then were already concerned about salinity on their land and those kinds of problems. And they're really big problems. And often there isn't one solid answer to that. You know, there are lots of small things that they need to do. And I think that farmers are constantly moving forward in that direction, you know, looking after the land, looking after biodiversity, looking after the ecosystem. And they're thinking of their sons, their daughters, their grandchildren. You know, it's not just this year. You know, they're very aware of their land. They're born on the land, and they know they have to care for it.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Let's talk about the Australian flora and fauna, because that has been a big inspiration for you. So when did you first realise that that's what you were very passionate about? And how have you gone about to translate that into a yarn colourway?
As I said, when I was 13 and I first came to Australia, I still remember the images that I then saw. You know, the colours made an enormous impact on me. And then a few years ago, we moved from Queensland to Western Australia, and it's quite a dry environment here, but the colours are something else. They're more vivid, more extreme again. The blossoms on the eucalyptus trees, they're large and they're bright reds, bright pinks. They're just so stunning. And I'm a visual person anyway, and I just kept noticing them and taking them in. And I just love the beauty that we have in this state. Australia is a really beautiful country anyway, but I find that Western Australia, as far as the flowers is concerned, is just amazing. I've never seen anything like it, actually. And there is not one month in the year where there isn't something that's flowering just beautifully. So I've just come back from a beautiful trip up north. My husband and I, we did 1,000 kilometres in 3 days. Now, for Australia, that's not much, but we drove 500 kilometres in the first day, directly north, pretty much a little bit inland, to a place called Mullawar, and that was just to see the wildflowers, and there were so many species. It's a bumper crop this year. They are just flowering so beautifully because we've had a lot of rain, and now the sun's out and the blossoms are all out, and they're just stunning. So, yeah, that was really, really beautiful, and just the serenity of the country, and, you know, just
I'm
the joy
totally
of seeing all that
envious.
colour. Oh, Andrea, it's a must do. And it was so funny because you hardly see anyone on the country roads because, you know, Australia's quite an empty country. But then you get to the wildflower fields and there are lots of other cars and people taking photos and everybody just enjoying that peace and quiet. It really is it's so good for the soul to do that. It was lovely. And even my husband, who, you know, isn't into the same things as I am in that regard, but he just loved it. He was looking for flowers and saying, have we seen this one yet? And what's this one called? And we had our wildflower identification book there with us. And it was just really, really enjoyable. And then, of course, being a visual person, I was just kind of looking at nature's way of putting colours together, you know, the really soft colours with the really vivid colours, and how Mother Nature just throws all that together. It's just stunning. So I've come back with enormous amount of inspiration for that, and that's really, really nice. So I can't wait for those colours to sort of start coming out of the dye pot. So that'll be next week. Yeah.
How exciting. I really envy you that trip. I've never been to Western Australia, but I've heard from many people that that's a trip you've got to do. Definitely inland.
It's stunning.
And, yeah. Great.
Yeah. So with my chemistry knowledge from my veterinary science degree, you study quite a bit of chemistry, and that's what I've really enjoyed, is taking those the pigments and then mixing them together to try and make the colours that I see out in the field and see on the trees and see on the shrubs. And, you know, occasionally it's the exact colour, but I must admit I do allow the artist's impression of something to come out as well. I think that's equally valuable, is like, for example, I'll show you some colours if you like.
Definitely.
So this colour is called blue gum, and it's a very, very soft grey sort of blue. And I thought it was like the blue gums, you know, that grow around here, and they grow in Sydney, and, you know, the eucalyptus trees. And then one time I actually decided to test it, and I took it and put it beside the tree, and I can tell you it was actually nothing like the tree. And I was actually really disappointed in myself that I'd gotten it so wrong. But it's creativity. You know, we create what's in our mind, what we connect to that bit of nature. And for me, this colour was it. And I do really love the colour. It's
beautiful.
One of my favourite colours. Yeah, thank you. It's a very soft
it's
sort of
like
colour.
a blue gum with the moonlight shining on it.
Yes, it is. Actually, with here on camera, it's showing up a little bit more baby blue, but it's a little bit more misty sort of blue than what you can see. But actually, I don't know if you can see this shawl here is actually blue gum breezes, which is a gradient in the same sort of colourway, and that was created especially for this pattern that was designed by an Australian designer, Meg Gadsby, and that's been really popular, and I love it too. And then what I'm wearing is a gradient called the Pilbara Dust Devil, and the Pilbara Dust Devils are these whirlies that are up north here, and the wind comes through and just picks up the red dust, and everybody just runs for cover because, you know, if you get stuck in one of those, you'd have dust in, you know, your nose and everywhere. But yeah, I wanted to create something that had the sort of brightness of the Australian earth, but also that real dust, dirty sort of colour that I think Australia is also known for. So it sort of runs from one into the other gradually, and I love and it's been very popular. And you asked me about some other colours. So this one is a really dark grey, and that was created, it's called wallaroo, and a wallaroo is a big marsupial, and they live in the north of Australia. So that was wallaroo. This one, for example, is called Mandalay, and Mandalay is a beach off Australia that's quite rough, actually. You wouldn't go swimming there, but it's got a very greenish blue tinge to the water there, and it made an impression on me, and so Mandalay was born. So that's those colours. This one, this is Rigid Didge. So this is a different yarn base. This has a little bit of nylon in it, so it makes it better for socks, for example. But the colour is called Corymbia, which is the scientific name for some of our eucalyptus species, and that reflects the colours of the leaves of the eucalyptus trees. And then this one, you might guess, Andrea, that's called Uluru. After Ayers Rock,
yes,
you know, the gigantic red rock in the centre of Australia. So there's some of the semi-solid colours. Oh, sorry, I bumped the camera. And then this pair is called Wallambanksia, and I've been creating pairs of skeins where one is a little bit darker and one is a little bit lighter, and this shawl here was actually created for those yarns. So you knit the body of the shawl in the darker and then the lace in the lighter. And Wallambanksia is a banksia that grows on the east coast of Australia and has those dirty light yellows, and so that's what you can see through these skeins. And then I've been speckling some yarns because, you know, we're all speckling yarns these days. But speckling yarns is so much fun. And so the everlasting wildflowers, they grow in just north of Perth here. And there's a place called Three Springs, a small township, and that's where all the everlastings are. And this is the green of their tall stems, and then the dirt of the Australian soils in there, and then the pinks and the yellows and the whites of the everlasting petals. They're so pretty. So yeah, that's how everlasting was. Three Springs, I beg your pardon, but it was inspired by the everlasting flowers. Yeah. So that's how. So different things, different flowers, different soils, different animals sort of inspire me to dye different colorways, different, you know, speckles or semi-solids or anything.
So what other aspirations do you have for your business that you'd like to share with us to finish off with?
I started the business in November last year, so it's still very early days. But there are a few things that I would really like to do. I would really like to grow to a size where I'm able to employ some people. I think employing people is doing a lot for your community. You know, to provide a job for somebody else, I think, is a really big thing, and I would like to be able to do that. I would also like to be able to, every now and again, help somebody else out through the way of charity somehow. At the moment, we're trying to donate some money to the plight of dingoes. We have been able to raise some funds for a township nearby here that was burnt down last year. So just when the moment comes along where an opportunity arises, I would like to be able to raise some money through dyeing wool and selling it and donating some of those funds to a charity that, you know, that is nearby. And then further in business-wise, I suppose, I'm trying to create another line of yarn at the moment that is purely my own, and I'm really, really excited about that. We've had our first prototype come back, and it needs a little bit of tweaking, but I'm really excited because it's already looking really good. Again, it's Australian Merino. It's a single ply yarn, and yeah, that's really exciting. And then because I have the opal knowledge, having been involved with that family business, and I love the colours of opal so much, I would love to dye yarn to match up with opals and potentially sell those as sets, opals with the skeins of yarn to match. So they're all ideas that are sort of...
That's a very innovative idea. I think it'll have a lot of potential.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. I hope so. It's all just about sharing Australia and, you know, sharing it with the world and showing what we've got. You know, we have so much beauty in our country, and I'm so proud of it, and I just love showing it to everyone.
That's so wonderful. That really is. I mean, I feel your passion for Australia, and I feel like that too. And it's amazing for me when I'm over here, when Australia is sort of out of sight. I'm quite happy, but when I hear about it or see it, or I see the beautiful colours, I am so homesick. It is an absolutely gorgeous country, and it's wonderful that you're making use of everything that it's got, and you're putting it into, using it as your inspiration source and putting it into your yarn so that other people can see it and feel it. And yeah, so I wish you so much luck with your business. I think it's lovely. I love your passion, as I've said, behind it, and I love your colourways. I love the combination of the darker gradient with the lighter gradient. I think that's an excellent idea for the shawls, and you can do a lot of creative things with that. So it's been wonderful to have you today on the podcast, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. You've been such a delight. Thank you so much for asking me on. It's just an absolute pleasure. And if you want to come and visit, please do. You're always welcome here in WA. Our doors are open.
We'll probably take you up on it.
Absolutely, please do. That'll be lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll say goodbye to the viewers now.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye now.